Well, how the hell are you going to appeal to people who are, well-meaning members of these various secret societies unless you speak in their own language in order to try and explain to them some of the symbolism and the rites and the rituals where it comes from? Not that some of the rites and rituals are wrong, it's just that you're doing a normal critique. In order to relate to these people, you've got to know what they're doing. You got to know what.
Well, Michael, I don't want to disagree with you, but anything that has the power to ban something, there's a right of association. It itself could turn into a great tyranny. I mean, I think there should be public exposure. There should be open discussions. If groups are found to be involved in collusion, the classic case of, somebody who's committed a murder, the Mason in distress sign and they're let off. That happened with a great uncle I had. I mean, he told us about it. It was the cases in the newspaper. But, his argument was he had to go through a Masonic trial afterwards, to find out if that was, true, or they would have, quote, dealt with him, drowning him, if he would have lied. You tell low-level Masons that they just don't, they're just not aware of the higher-level things that go on. But asking you a question, how do you say ban these things? The engine that could ban these societies would rise up into a mighty tyranny itself.
Yeah, there's always that danger, and there's always a danger that, by making them illegal, they go underground. It's not a total win solution, but what needs to happen is that the ordinary people have got to find out about the tiger in the long grass and at least arm themselves up with even a modicum. I mean, that's what our programs are doing. That's what our work is doing. And you do have to address it. I like to address them because it's better to address them. You can address the beginners, you can address the seasoned, and you have to address the insider as well. So my work goes a lot to the insiders. I mean, you said it yourself a few minutes ago. You had insiders from the Orange Lodge, insiders from the IRA, whistleblowers. If you look back through the whole conspiracy movement and the exposure, you'll find that the greatest damage is being done by the generals, by the insiders, by the politicians, even up to the level of presidents who've come out and written memoirs and exposed the tiger in the long grass. So we never, it's not my main focus, but it's something that we surely need to always, take on board.
Okay, Michael, listen, I'm going to skip this break for Infowars.com listeners. They'll get a little behind the scenes since we got you on late. I want to do a little bit of a pre-interview to see what you wanted to get into. We'll discuss that now for the
Free yourself.
Strange days have found us.
All right, we're going to go over the basic view from Michael Tsarion of British Secret Society networks using Freemasonry as one vehicle because of its secrecy. They can inhabit any group. And then the secret symbolism, the language that's all around us that they communicate through. And again, the low-level Masons aren't even part of it. And there are other religious groups and secret groups. Masons oversimplifies it. Then we'll get into what the end game is and the technocratic oppression, the electronic control grid. We've got an hour and 35 minutes left with our guest. Okay, Michael, you got the floor. Start rolling.
Well, that was, when I got over to States, then I had to basically brush up. And that's when I bumped into the work of Nord Davis and especially Ralph Epperson, who's just great. His work put a lot of pieces together for me. And then, of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and Eustace Mullins. It became like a study because when I realized that the average American doesn't know anything about this, I'd bump into the average, I bump into occasionally to a Vietnam vet who had been through so much hell through the VA hospitals that these guys knew, something about what was going on, especially about the federal system and the Federal Reserve and so on. And so my education began in the 90s, to sort of brush up on, okay, I've seen it in an Irish context. I've seen that one picture of tyranny, but how does this work in the American context, So as I started to study more and get into the Webster Tarpleys, you see, and even the Dr. John Coleman's, it was a long discovery to find out that this country didn't really win the war of independence because they let their guard down. They became so apathetic. They became so decadent and narcissistic that, it was easy pickings right from the time of, the first presidents, basically, for this federalistic group to get into, to insinuate itself into the body politic of America through the federal systems, to get rid of the republic, to change the Constitution, to amend it, and so forth and so on, all the stuff that you've covered yourself and so many things. This was my education to find out. But my main point was, though, is more of a historian aspect to say, look, never forget that America is just the last in line to be taken down. The people who are doing this have colonized and colonized the world. They've been doing it for centuries of time. And my researches lead it back to Egypt. First of all, I had studied the ancient Irish myths. That helped me, with my first book on Atlantis, to get into a lot of areas there to show just how ancient this actual, oligarchy is, that they keep bloodlines, and these bloodlines are still today, and the politicians that pop their heads up every 4 years, there they are again with their bloodline connections back to the ancient royal oligarchs of Europe. But then what happened is I got more and more, into it after the first book was done. Then I started to really look at the Egyptian roots of this, and my research took me to a group that I refer to as the Atenists. It's the same group of people would refer to, say, by the terms such as Luciferian or whatever. My term for it is Atenists. This is going back to the 14th dynasty, the 18th dynasty of Europe, 18th dynasty of Egypt, about 1400 years BC is where it all began. So I've actually traced it back to the reign of the Pharaoh Akhenaten. And
well, just to be clear, when you read mainline, even British history, they say they're related to the pharaohs. They say they are related to Moses, and the queen is coronated on Jacob's stone, and all of this, and so they really believe this. And worldwide, international royalty, even in Japan, says that the greatest queen is the royalty in England, and that they all claim they're part of that and are part of the same secret societies there. So regardless of whether it's true or not, they do claim lineage to the pharaohs.
You're absolutely spot on. And you see, it doesn't have to be necessarily just bloodline. For a certain amount of the top boys, it is a bloodline connection. For everybody else that serves this monster, it's an ideological connection, equally as bad, equally as pernicious. These are not people who serve the good of the human race or for the uplift of the human race. These are ancient pharaohs who have kept bloodline dynasties, and people better believe that they have not gone away. The different houses of Europe that I address, you see, and the symbolism that they use. So as I started to track this back, it started to explain these things about, like you say, the symbolism behind the coronation, and all the various other symbolism and regalia that we see throughout all of Europe as well as Britain. And it was fascinating to see that, how it all went back to this particular individual and his sort of megalomania, this Akhenaten, and his basically solar cult. These were worshippers of the sun. They were worshippers of what I refer to as the dark side of the sun. And, their generation, they were expurged finally from Egypt. They had basically committed so much desecration on the land of Egypt that finally, in the reign of Akhenaten, the people of Egypt rose up and basically exiled these guys. And then history loses track of them. They just disappear. Whether you're coming at this from a biblical point of view, as you said, through the Moses story, or you're coming at it through alternative historical approaches, basically they're meant to have fallen off the map, and history pays them no more mind. My work picks up on the fact that after they were exiled, after this famous exodus, they did not fade away, and that these people are instrumental behind the, powers in Greece.
All right, stay there. Stay there. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Michael Tsarion. Michael Tsarion, before we go any further, give out your website for listeners that want to check it out.
Well, it's michaeltsarion.com, and the new DVD on technology, architectsofcontrol.com.
Yeah, I was checking out the trailer for that. That looks really powerful. Tsarion is Tsarion. So michaeltsarion.com. Michael, now again, I don't know if the Queen of England's really related to Moses. I don't know if she's really related to the Egyptian pharaohs, BC. I don't know if the Sun King of France, was really related to Jesus' family. The point is, they believe they are. They take it deadly serious, and I've been inside Bohemian Grove. People say, oh, that's just a play, a mock human sacrifice. Well, regardless of what it is, those old men that I was with in that crowd of about 1,500 watching the ritual, they were in religious rapture. They were grinding their teeth. They were breathing heavy. Whatever the real ritual was over behind some black curtains from the trees across the water before they brought the baby, the small child, the effigy over to burn it. Before Lilith, but then, of course, these occultists use different names. They called it Moloch. I know that's the bull, but they call their owl Moloch. And they address it as a female and then as a male deity. And then it's all on video in my film, the order of death, and then we had somebody else sneak in who they then set up and sent to prison. Chris Jones, no relation to me. So, I mean, this is really going on. They really believe this, whether it's true or not. I know you, from your deep research in Europe and around the world, believe that there is some basis in fact in it. So let's continue on, Michael.